Coming in at number 10 is the Sentry plus the Void. The Sentry and the Void are two sides of an incredibly powerful coin. Sentry is like a more powerful Superman, as controversial as that may be to say, but in order to balance him out, there is the dark side of the Sentry known as the Void, who is just as, if not more, powerful than the Sentry is. It keeps his character interesting and doesn't make him the center of everything in the Marvel Universe. Well, in Sentry 2018, issues 4 and 5, these two opposing sides of one man become whole, and it is absolutely insane. Apart from looking so incredibly cool, the whole Sentry was able to completely whoop the antagonist of the series, Billy, shapeshifting with black tendrils, withstanding energy blasts without a scratch, and altering reality in a small space to finally defeat his former sidekick. Then, the Avengers show up with She-Hulk, Captain Marvel, Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, and a whole hell of a lot of backup, and they can do nothing to him or to stop him. It didn't last forever, but it was an insane level of power contained inside one man. Number 9. Spider-Hulk. In the Immortal Hulk with Great Power story, Peter Parker is granted the alter ego of the Hulk after Loki magically transfers the Gamma power to him. So it's Spider-Man with all his relative spider powers mixed with the unstoppable green monstrosity of the Hulk, matched up with all the temperament of a toddler that comes with it. It's actually really cool, and there are tons of hilarious moments in the story. Eventually, the power of the Hulk is switched back to Banner with the help of the Fantastic Four and Banner's own genius, but it's a short little story that seems almost self-contained, but it's an insanely cool one, and a Spider-Hulk would be an incredibly powerful character if he were to show up again and had more time to hone his abilities and his temper tantrums.
At number 8 is Arm Fall-Off Boy. Arm Fall-Off Boy has the incredible ability to detach his own limbs, which he can then use as blunt weapons. Right, so you mean like punching? Oh no, you see, by whipping his leg at you, he's got more leverage and momentum, thus delivering a more powerful blow. Okay, so why wouldn't he just use a staff? What, and have an appendage that's not in use? Clearly you know nothing of battle strategy. As a wannabe superhero, Arm Fall-Off Boy first appeared when he tried out for the Legion of Superheroes, but since his power is totally useless, no it isn't! Arm Fall-Off Boy thus became the very first hero to be rejected from the Legion. At number 7 is the infamous Bailey Hoskins with the power to self-destruct. This one's one of the more tragic superheroes who ends up losing his life after only 4 issues when he finally gets to use his power. We can only assume that this character should land on a list like this every single time, considering that the comic series that he's featured in is literally titled the worst X-Men ever. But to be fair, this miniseries is known to be a pretty epic read considering the stakes at hand during the run. Bailey has to decide whether or not he's going to use his powers when an evil mutant dictator threatens to take over. But later in X-Men Empire, we're introduced to a strange zombified version of a living mutant known as Explodey Boy, who's suggested to be an undead version of Bailey himself. So maybe that version of him is more powerful since he doesn't have to worry about the whole demise thing every time he explodes. But no matter which way you slice it, this is arguably one of the worst superhero powers of all time. At number 6 is Hell Cow. So here's Bessie, just your mundane, run-of-the-mill cow, right? Chewing cud, enjoying the pasture views, just living that utterly predictable life. But then out of the blue, or should I say out of the moonlight, comes Count Dracula. You see, old Count D was feeling a bit peckish and couldn't find his usual human buffet, so instead, he turns his attention to her unsuspecting bovine buddy, thus deciding to go for a milkshake and takes a bite out of Bessie. And you would think that would mark the end of Bessie's cow-tastrophe, right? Well, wrong. Drax's bite turns her into a vampire cow, sprouting wings and sporting super bovine speed and strength. Now I know what you're thinking, is Bessie the cream of the crop when it comes to superheroes? Well, I mean, probably not. I mean, let's be honest, when you're stacking up against the likes of Iron Man, Spider-Man, and the Hulk, a vampire cow might seem a bit, well, cheesy. But hey, Marvel Comics saw otherwise, so who am I to milk the situation for more puns? At number 5 is Friendly Fire. Friendly Fire, the heroes whose powers took an unfortunate detour. Imagine having the ability to shoot out potent energy bolts, only to find that your aim is better suited for friendly gatherings rather than crime fighting. Yeah, you guessed it, Friendly Fire's energy bolts have an uncanny knack for hitting his allies instead of foes. And in a rather iconic twist, he once managed to hit himself, sealing his own fate. This ill-fated hero found a home in Section 8, a team of misfit superheroes whose powers don't quite align with their aspirations. Friendly Fire's tale serves as a stark reminder that not every power is a guaranteed win in the world of superheroes, and sometimes fate has its own peculiar plans. At number 4 is the one and only Doorman. Doorman, the teleporter with a name that's as bland as a loaf of unsalted bread. Sure, teleportation sounds cool, but his version involves turning himself into a living doorway. I mean, picture this, you're in battle, explosions everywhere, and Doorman's like, walk through me, buddy. It's kind of like an awkward game of superhero limbo. I mean, Doorman seriously needs an upgrade. Less doormat, more dynamo. Until then, watch out for the human portal blocking your way to victory. At number 3 is Matter Eater Lad. His ability to consume, devour, and digest just about anything sounds like the ultimate party trick, right? I mean, talk about ultimate power snacking. But here's the catch. Writers have had a tough time serving scenarios where his powers truly shine. While it's entertaining to picture him chowing down on a villain's nefarious plans, the real challenge lies in finding practical applications for his abilities in a world already populated with characters capable of flight, super strength, and laser vision. Instead of epic battles, he's often relegated to the sidelines, left to deal with things like interplanetary diplomacy rather than superheroic feats. Not to say that that doesn't demand superheroes, just not ones with his particular skill set. But what if he got a power up? I mean, imagine him not just eating matter, but gaining temporary properties from the molecules he munches on, like, I don't know, maybe the waste products from ingesting certain elements gives him atomic flatulence. I don't know. Suddenly, he's not just a quirky eater, but he's a versatile asset. But until then, let's chew on the possibilities. At number 2 is Stoneboy. Stoneboy is a superhero who's immovable as a boulder and as useful as, well, a boulder. You see, he has this nifty power to transform into solid stone, making him invulnerable to almost anything. Sounds awesome, right? Well, here's the catch. Once he is stoned up, he is stuck in place, as mobile as a literal rock. Sounds too familiar, but wait, here's more. Stoneboy hails from the planet Zwen, where he takes a coffee break. Their planet rotates at a snail's pace, and during their celestial crawl, everyone on his planet turns into statues for a cosmic power nap, Stoneboy included. Now imagine being a superhero trying to save the day when you can't even chase down a snail. I mean, Stoneboy desperately needs a power-up that lets him rock and roll, otherwise he's just a really tough garden decoration in the grand scheme of things. And at number 1 is Aquaman. Aquaman, the ruler of the seas and communicator with aquatic life, making him useful exclusively in marine missions. Otherwise, what's he got going for him? An impressive swim speed? Yeah, I'm starting to wonder if he's swimming in the shallow end of the power pool. I mean, sure, talking to fish is cool and all, but in a world of metahumans with abilities that could reshape reality, it's a bit like showing up to a western cowboy duel armed with a rubber duck. Now don't get me wrong, Aquaman has his moments of epicness, but let's face it, his power sets sometimes feel more like he's suited for a marine biologist than a mass vigilante. I mean, imagine if Aquaman could control water at will, shaping it into powerful weapons or using it to manipulate his environment. And if he could waterbend, think about the potential. If he could, say, control the rate at which water molecules vibrate, thus allowing him to freeze or boil water at will, the applications for that power set are boundless. I mean, it's not that Aquaman is without his charm or usefulness, but in a world where heroes are constantly pushing the boundaries of their abilities, our underwater champion could use a boost. After all, oceans cover more than 70% of our planet, and that's a lot of untapped potential. So whether it's through ancient artifacts or cosmic revelations or some inventive storyline twist, let's just hope that Aquaman gets the power up he deserves and emerges from the depths as a true force to be reckoned with. At number 10 is Cyclops. Thank you to usernames are taken on 3 on Reddit for the following rant, which sums it up perfectly. Cyclops is one of the very few characters in Marvel and DC whose powers have remained basically the same since the very beginning. Hell, if anything, he's gotten nerfed. Many Cyclops fans would say that he doesn't need any power up and is just as good as he is. And as a huge Cyclops fan myself, I totally disagree. I mean, it would have been okay if not for literally almost everybody else in X-Men getting power-ups after power-ups. I mean, just look at the original X-Men team. X-Men went from throwing snowballs and making some ice structures to becoming an Omega level mutant who's basically immortal. Angel went Archangel and got much more powerful wings and physique. Beast got countless transformations. Jean, I mean, where to even start with Jean? She only had the telekinesis in the beginning, then she got telepathy, then she got stronger and stronger, then she got the Phoenix Force, and even the time-displaced younger Jean, don't ask, got some kind of pink-colored powers that made her much more powerful. Now you may think it's a bad argument just because others are getting something Cyclops should get too, or that power creep is bad and it's a good thing that Cyclops hasn't been the victim of that yet. And I would have agreed if not for almost every single person in X-Men getting power-ups. At a certain point, a character needs to be more powerful even if there's the dreaded power creep on the horizon, because as it is, the character is just weak. Piccolo. But this isn't the only reason Cyclops needs a power-up. The other reason is the nature of his powers. They're very restrictive and one-dimensional. That kind of superpower needs to be absurdly strong or it's meaningless. I mean, seriously, Rogue probably has better destructive feats than Cyclops. Like, when was the last time Cyclops blasted through something that was supposed to be really tough? I mean, has he ever done that? Because he needs to. I mean, okay, think about it this way. What makes the Flash stand out in the Justice League even though Superman is there? Because writers understood that seeing as the Flash only has super speed, he needs to be better at it than Superman. Then they added a lot more more powers because of the Speed Force, but I digress. And it's not just the Flash. Green Arrow and Hawkeye have absurd inhuman levels of marksmanship because that's the only thing they have. Captain America's shield is more durable than almost anything in the entire Marvel Universe because apart from that, he's just a peak human. Batman's intellect and martial arts skills are superior to almost everyone in the whole DC Universe because he doesn't have any powers. Cyclops needs to get in that category, or he needs some other powers to make him more versatile. Powers play a big part in making a superhero interesting. It's not everything, but it does play a bigger part than most people think, in my opinion. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 9 is iBoy. Trevor Hawkins and his 57 eyes, the ultimate surveillance package. I mean, who wouldn't want telescopic, microscopic, and X-ray vision all at once? But let's be real here. Trevor might be better suited for a career in high-tech espionage or scientific research than straight-up superhero action. I mean, can you imagine him trying to blend into a crowd? He's like a walking security camera system, and I bet he never loses at Where's Waldo. Trevor, my man, time to put those eyes to work in ways no one ever imagined and maybe invest in a little, I don't know, stylish eye patch for the sake of good night's sleep.
At number 8, we have Captain Marvel's Nega Bands. Although you may know Marvel's suit as already having the Nega Bands as part of the package, this wasn't always the case. Before he acquires them, he is still extremely powerful from being empowered by a cosmic entity named Zoe, later properly realized as Eon. He's able to fly faster than light speed, has superhuman strength, and is also able to teleport anywhere in the universe instantly. So it's hard to imagine how a suit upgrade would offer any sort of improvement, but it does. When the Nega Bands are added to the equation, Marvel is then able to travel between reality and the negative zone whenever he wants. But that's not all, at all. He can also absorb any energy that is coming at him, be it a powerful blast from an enemy or even the energy of the sun. They are also capable of providing healing powers and increased strength. They even keep the wearer from requiring food, air, water, and sleep, which is pretty helpful. They do have their limitations though. They don't protect from drowning or gas-based attacks. And this actually leads to Captain Marvel's demise when he's inflicted with a poison gas by Nitro that actually gives him terminal cancer. But anyway, let's not get too dark here. These Nega Bands are a huge upgrade for Marvel, and that's all that matters in terms of this suit. At number 7 is the Superman Godfall suit upgrade. Now, considering Superman's unmatched strength, he doesn't really have much use for upgrades in that regard, but this suit upgrade is all about the looks and the motorcycle. In the Superman Godfall storyline, Superman has lost his memory and is living in what appears to be a dystopian city called Kandor, alongside his wife Lila. It's a state we aren't used to seeing Superman in. He's got a job, working at a kitchen, and appears to be living a pretty human life, without even his secret identity needing to be hidden. And his costume is just, it's so cool and Blade Runner-esque with a Tron-style motorcycle to boot. I mean, who doesn't want to see Superman having access to a motorcycle when he's facing off against dystopian villains? It's just a great reimagining of the character and the suit he wears, and I think it's a fair addition to this list. Upgrades don't always have to be based on abilities and features, you know. Looks matter too. Okay, at number 6, I'm putting Blade's silver armor from Blade Vampire Hunter from 1999. Taking a break from the usual mysterious green or black trench coat, this suit offers a whole new image for Blade. Now, I don't know if I'd say this is his best look ever, but I will say that it's a big upgrade in terms of utility. Having armor seems like a pretty obvious call for a vampire hunter from the get-go, so when I found the silver armor, I knew it had to make an appearance on the list. And the main reason why this suit ranks higher on the list is that silver is known to be a weakness for vampires, which are naturally a threat to a vampire hunter. This suggests that aside from the defense upgrade, this suit also gives Brooks a huge added advantage against his typical foes, on top of the obvious protective advantage. Even though it only sticks around for 2 years, this is a good upgrade for the character that offers much more protection than his typical garb. With a silver chestplate and silver gauntlets, this costume just gives Eric Brooks a more reasonable level of protection and sort of fits him into the category of superhero a bit more. At least in the traditional sense of how he looks. I still think it was the right move to bring him back to his original black leather jacket after this suit ran its course, but it is a good moment for Blade's armor in the grand scheme of things. At number 5, we've got a controversial one, Wolverine's heated claws. Although this upgrade is known to be slightly silly and short-lasting, I think it's probably one of the best straight-up upgrades on this list. It's not an attachment or an aesthetic update, but a good old-fashioned upgrade of the pre-existing power, and it's Wolverine's primary weapon of choice, so getting to keep using the same old equipment, except now it can heat up to extreme temperatures, that's pretty good. And what makes it even cooler is how the heated claws are formed. When Wolverine is resurrected from death, the excess energy left over from his body's healing process goes into his claws and brings the adamantium to extreme temperatures. Now remember, these claws are made of one of the most durable metals in the universe, so even though heated metal tends to soften, you shouldn't expect his adamantium claws to do the same. These things are driving right into any and every enemy like a hot knife through soft butter. Ew, that's a weird visual. But it's true, and not to mention, this dude just came back from the dead, so you can expect him to be pretty angry and ready to take it out on anyone in his way. Okay, at number 4 is the Iron Spider suit. Now, this is such a huge upgrade that the word upgrade doesn't even do it justice. Now, if you've seen my list of the top 10 Spider-Man suits, you know that the hero has had many different suits and they are all useful in their own right. But this one is probably the most drastic change that the suit endures in the right direction. Designed by Tony Stark himself, this upgrade changes literally every aspect of the suit for the better. It gets these 4 spider legs with grips and cameras on the ends of them, allowing the wearer to use them to climb walls hands-free, as well as use the cameras to see around corners. He's also got the same internal HUD system as Iron Man's suit, giving him heightened senses using the computer's intel, not to mention the sophisticated mask system that offers full filtration to keep him from facing a similar fate to Captain Marvel. And a gliding system, giving him more hang time between web swings. It's a huge upgrade to the suit that totally changes the game for Spider-Man and offers him a whole new set of capabilities with which to defend himself and to best all the bad guys. At number 3, we've got Iron Man's Hulkbuster suit, which is an insanely powerful upgrade to the typical Iron Man suit, as you can probably already tell by the name. Now, just like Spidey, Iron Man has seen tons of different iterations of his suit, but in this case, this upgrade has a very specific function: to bust the Hulk. To fight the Hulk, yes. The goal is to get the suit to a point where it's ready to take on the Hulk. Otherwise known as Iron Man's Mark 44 armor, this upgrade gives Tony Stark all the tools he needs to take down a bad guy bigger than those he's used to. This thing has a missile launcher, a grappling hook, and something called automatic prehensile propulsion technology, which is basically a function that allows the armor to assemble on its own when it's called upon. And considering the Hulk's impulsive reputation, this feature would probably come in handy if the Hulk suddenly decided he wasn't on Tony's side anymore. On top of all this, he's got the built-in rams, which are used to add that extra oomph to Iron Man's punches. And if he decides that brute force is no use against the Green Giant, he's also got sleeping gas built into this thing. Although it's not super useful in the movies, this feature will definitely find its benefit at some point down the line if applied properly. At number 2 are Spider-Man's web shooters. I know this is the second Spider-Man upgrade on this list, but it's just a classic upgrade that must be mentioned. I mean, I would even argue that this is the ultimate superhero suit upgrade. And what makes this one really special is that it's the first time we're really shown how much of a scientific genius Peter Parker is. Sure, his character is established on the basis that he's very smart and proficient in biology, but this invention basically allows him to be Spider-Man. Not only does he design the shooters themselves, but he creates the web fluid, which is arguably one of the most useful and durable materials in the world. This list features plenty of upgrades that take an already powerful suit and bring it to a new level, but this entry is an upgrade that turns a guy with superhuman strength and reflexes into, well, Spider-Man. We all know about this one, and it's almost seen as a given at this point, but it really deserves credit for what it really is and was at the time of its creation. A huge step into Spider-Man's career as a superhero. Alright, at number 1 we have the Batman Justice Buster upgrade, which ranks high on the list because, once again, the word upgrade is a total understatement on this one. I break this one down in more depth than the top 10 Batman suits list, but basically, this suit is designed to take on the Justice League. So every element of this suit has some sort of benefit against each of the members of the Justice League, giving the mortal Bruce Wayne an unmatched advantage against any opponents, not just the Justice League. Considering the suit he dons before the Justice Buster is just his typical costume, having a mechanized suit that has processors that work faster than the Flash can move is a pretty big upgrade. And besides the many features specific for taking down the members of the Justice League, this suit just has huge defense stats and attack strength that would help Bruce in any combat situation.
Number 10, Goblin King. What would happen if Norman Osborn got his hands on the Infinity Gauntlet? Well, this is a hypothetical future that does exist somewhere in the multiverse that we get to explore via the What If Infinity Dark Reign one-shot comic. Now, this comic combines the two events of Infinity and Dark Reign to give us a future where Norman Osborn not only creates and leads his own Dark Avengers team as head of a new government operation in the place of S.H.I.E.L.D., known as Hammer, but also a reality where he manages to get his hands, or more specifically his hand, on the Infinity Gauntlet, complete with its matching set of Infinity Stones. Mainly, Norman uses this gauntlet to fight against the heroes who would still oppose him and his team, but also to deal with some, well, honestly, some daddy issues. You see, Norman's dad seemingly never loved him, and also was actually really mean to Norman, to be fair. And so Norman wants to prove to his father how great he is now, and rub his face in the fact that the son he thought would never amount to anything is now in essence the ruler of the universe. However, this doesn't work out exactly as Norman had planned in this, hypothetical, this alternate universe, and actually ends up backfiring on him in the end. I'm not gonna spoil it because it's a pretty fun twist, but you should check it out. It's a good little one shot. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not subscribe? Do it, click that subscribe button. It helps me out, it helps you out, helps the planet out. It's just good for everybody, really. Number 9, Goddess Selene. During the Necrotia story arc, Selene Gallio became more than the Black Queen. She sought to also become a goddess over life and death, but really more focusing on the death part, after aiming to gain the ability to basically devour all life on Earth. I mean, she is like a psychic vampire after all, so it kind of makes sense. To do so, she had to perform a blood sacrifice with a specific dagger belonging to her, which she ended up having to recapture. She succeeded in doing this, and for a moment, she actually seemed pretty unstoppable. However, Warpath ends up defeating Selene in the end by using her own dagger to defeat her, causing her to explode into blinding beams of light, with her seemingly also dying. Selene, however, does survive this and later, of course, will return. Even before Selene aimed to become a goddess, she was extremely powerful and worshipped as one, being a super powerful type of immortal mutant known as an external. But Necrotia really was an upgrade in the sense that her godhood wasn't just a title based on her standard power set, but a title earned through enhancing her powers. She also basically had like an undead mutant army, so that in of itself is also an upgrade.
Number 8, Spider-Man and the Cosmic Comic. Sometimes Marvel will make a joke character or scenario, and it ends up creating a character more powerful than any other character possibly ever. In How to Read Comics the Marvel Way, issues 1 to 4, the comic itself becomes a character, and it starts off trying to teach the reader how exactly to read comic books. The comic follows Spider-Man in a conflict with Mysterio, who found the Cosmic Comic, the same one speaking to us, in the basement of the Natural History Museum. It allowed Mysterio to freeze Spider-Man in time in a comic panel, turn inanimate objects to life, and increase his size. Once Spider-Man gets his spider sense back, he realizes that the Cosmic Comic is influencing events, and he grabs the comic, thinking it's one of Mysterio's tricks, and tears it in half. After realizing the error of his ways here, Spider-Man and Mysterio begin trying to write their own comics to use the Cosmic Comic to make their comics become reality. That was confusing, and I'm sorry. Thanks to the Cosmic Comic, they end up fighting across time, altering history, and Peter learns of the fact that he is a comic book character. Seeing all of his comic book publication history, taking in all of this info, he then fuses together with the Cosmic Comic, basically meaning he can control reality within Marvel Comics, which I think is even technically more powerful than multiversal power. He prints the comic that he created, which has him save the day and win the battle, and it changes reality so that that's the outcome of the fight with Mysterio. It's nuts. Number 7, Strange Visitor Superman. Superman. Okay, before we start on this point, technically this Superman is not canon, but he is one of my favorite versions of the character, and he is truly one of the more powerful versions of the character as well. In the story, Superman outlives everything in the universe, living for literally billions and billions of years. He lives so long and gets so powerful that he gains new abilities like being able to split himself into 1,000 different copies that allow the hero to do what he does best throughout the universe. He outlives all the gods, cosmic entities, mortals, angels, demons, everything. He watches countless civilizations rise and fall and learns an insane amount of skills like telepathy. He absorbs ridiculous amounts of energy, learns magic and strange sciences through all his copies, and then reabsorbs them at the end of everything. He can fly faster than the entropic waves of the end of the universe and can manipulate the fabric of reality through sheer strength. Number 6. Gambit. Now this really isn't an upgrade as much as it's an example of what Gambit could potentially become. Gambit's main mutant power is that he can take the energy of an object and convert it into kinetic energy and make it explode, essentially. His signature move is to do this with a deck of cards, which is really cool, but on a side note, extremely impractical. Like, he must spend so much money on decks of cards. Anyways, around the time of the Mutant Massacre, Gambit had begun to lose control of his abilities, which led him to Mr. Sinister, who removed a part of Gambit's brain in order to keep his abilities controllable. With an ability that seemingly lets him manipulate kinetic energy, Gambit could have been stupidly powerful if that part of his brain was not removed, and we know that because of an alternate version of Gambit called New Sun, who has achieved the potential that Gambit could have reached. He can manipulate kinetic energy at a molecular level. He doesn't have to touch objects to charge them. He can use his ability on living beings. He can stop moving objects dead in their tracks or cause objects that aren't moving to begin moving. He can turn himself into pure energy that lets him travel into space and other dimensions. New Sun was able to defeat Dark Phoenix, and he ended up destroying everyone on his own Earth. Now when New Sun confronts the 616 Gambit, 616 Gambit had restored his powers, and it allowed him to fly, heal himself, and even defeat New Sun. It's so cool, and it doesn't really get to that level ever again. Number 5. Wonder Woman. Again, gifted with the powers of the gods, Wonder Woman has many of the same abilities Superman possesses, including strength, speed, and durability. However, Wonder Woman's Amazonian training sets her a little apart as an amazing warrior. It's been debated for years whether Diana could beat Superman in a fight, and while she's shown to be capable of hurting him at least, she doesn't have the same raw power. Instead, Wonder Woman dominates her opponents through a combination of her special abilities, superior tactics, and special equipment gifted to her by the gods, but she has been elevated beyond that. When Diana was empowered with the World Forge and the Anti-Crisis energy at the end of Doom War / during Death Metal, she had enough power to shake stars and phase throughout time through sheer strength. She had displayed the ability to shrink an entire planet and was able to link everyone together and restored their memories as one history, as in all of DC's continuity. She has cosmic awareness, able to see multiple events during the war against the Batman Who Laughs at once, as well as precognition and retrocognition. She was crazy powerful for that short amount of time. Number 4. Dark Crisis Superman. During the events of DC's Dark Crisis event, the main players of the Justice League were wiped out. While everyone assumed that they were gone to their graves, what actually happened is that each member was trapped in their own little pocket reality. Batman, Hal Jordan Green Lantern, Barry Allen the Flash, and Wonder Woman were living in realities created by their own wishes and desires, and weren't really aware of what was happening, except for Batman, because he's Batman, and Superman. When the other members of the League who escaped their pocket realities come to free Superman, he is fully aware of the nature of his pocket reality, and the already insanely powerful Man of Steel has become massively more powerful. Superman had tried to escape this reality countless times, but he always failed. So, instead of putting that effort into escaping, he put his efforts into training himself and absorbing the cosmic energy of the pocket reality itself. He basically became what is basically a cosmically powered god and used that power to defeat the villain. Number 3. Emma Frost Lifebringer. In the alternate reality given to us in Marvel 2-in-1, 1 from 2018, instead of Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four saving our world from Galactus, it was actually Dr. Doom who did it, and in true Doom fashion, he saved the world in a pretty evil way to ensure he would be powered up in the process. Although, I don't believe that was what he was trying to do, but you know, whatever. Instead of trying to destroy Galactus, Doom used a transference device to take over the World Devourer's body. The catch is that Dr. Doom was now driven by the same hunger that Galactus had, and he ate every single planet in the universe, leaving Earth as the only planet left in the cosmos. Galactus gains more power as he consumes planets, so as you can imagine, this Doom Galactus hybrid who consumed the universe is incredibly powerful and incredibly hard to fight against when he turns his hunger back on the Earth. A whole group of heroes band together to save the Earth, but it's Emma Frost who makes the greatest sacrifice. Using another transference device, Frost transfers herself into Galactus, kicking out Doom, but also rewriting the core of Galactus's being, and instead of devouring worlds, she sets out to restore the universe back to the way it should be with the immense cosmic power of Emma Frost, Galactus Lifebringer. Number 2. Chaos King Hercules. The Chaos King is a little bit glossed over when talking about incredibly powerful villains, and I think that's because the story was focused around Hercules. Hercules is a cool character, but from what I know, he hasn't ever really received the same kind of popularity as other characters in Marvel, especially with the character of Thor, who is similar, being godly in nature and incredibly strong, but also just a bit, kind of a lot cooler. But the Chaos War story was insanely cool. Basically, the Chaos King, a universal entity of darkness, was able to defeat the gods of every pantheon and absorb their combined power. He also was powered by the souls of every being who had ever passed away in the whole universe from the beginning of time. He was extremely close to completely wiping out everything in the universe. In order to fight the Chaos King, Hercules gets himself imbued by the power of the elder god Gaia, and becomes an absolutely insanely powerful god of gods. He could teleport, fly, and emit energy blasts from his hands and eyes. He caused massive shockwaves and craters with every step he took. He very easily destroyed not only a Chaos King powered and controlled Zeus and Athena with one hit each, but the entire Council of Godheads itself as well. He summoned Galactus and the cosmic entity Eternity to fight for him against their will. He matched the Chaos King blow for blow at a size larger than a planet, and once the threat was gone, he restored every destroyed planet, realm, every being, entity, and god, and then he lost the power. And coming in finally at number 1 is Moon Knight. While Moon Knight is normally a regular old street level hero, the nature of his abilities, being the avatar of the Egyptian god Khonshu, means that he does have the potential to become ridiculously overpowered, which he does in the Age of Khonshu event. During this event, thanks to a supermoon, the normally relatively low-powered Moon Knight defeats the Iron Fist Danny Rand and uses an Ankh to steal his Iron Fist powers, which he then takes to the Sanctum Sanctorum and punches Doctor Strange using another Ankh to steal the power of the Eye of Agamotto. He then steals the car of Robbie Reyes' Ghost Rider, which he takes to Wakanda alongside an army of the dead to take the powers of Black Panther, which fails, but then he ends up facing Thor, steals his hammer Mjolnir, beats the snot out of Thor, and since Khonshu is the god of the moon, he summons a bunch of moons from different places in space and traps Thor between these giant celestial bodies. Now, the whole reason Moon Knight is doing any of this is because Khonshu told him to in order to defeat Mephisto in order to save the world, which Moon Knight easily does using an amped up Mjolnir to rip a hole through the Hell Lord. Unfortunately, Moon Knight is kind of forced to do the bidding of Khonshu, who now takes the power and uses it to essentially conquer the world. Since Moon Knight is a hero though, he eventually gets himself empowered by the Phoenix Force in order to face and defeat Khonshu himself. It was an insane story, and he even considered completely wiping out humanity at the end, but luckily did not.
Number 10. Harley Quinn. In retrospect, what might seem like a natural evolution for this character at the time, I'm sure, seemed quite revolutionary, considering her origin. Harley Quinn is a comic book character who originally hailed from the animated world of DC, being so successful and so well loved as a result of her animated appearances in Batman the Animated Series that she was incorporated as well into comic book lore. She was initially only intended to be a small character for the animated world as well, but simply became just too popular for her to not become more prominent in the show and then move over to the comics. Harley initially was introduced to us as the wacky clown girlfriend of the Joker, or perhaps more like his wannabe girlfriend, as the Joker seemed to often mistreat and sidestep Harley and her attempts at romance at almost every turn, often more focused on capturing or defeating Batman than he ever was on Harl's. His behavior towards her almost seemed to result in a kind of Stockholm-like syndrome manifesting in Harley, that Harley struggled to break thereafter. Fortunately, she did eventually break it, and with some help and support from her good friend and later girlfriend, Poison Ivy, I think we can all consider this was a major upgrade for her character, and her own prowess as a villain. And honestly, it makes sense, because I feel like Harley's so great she deserves to be independent, you know? Especially in the Harley Quinn animated series, it's quickly implied in season 1 that Harley was perhaps more of the secret mastermind behind the Joker than her puddin' would ever give her credit for.
Number 9. Doctor Doom Avengers BC. In Volume 5 of Thor from 2018, we get a little peek at the alternate reality of Earth 14412, where millions of years in the future, humankind has been completely wiped from the Earth, or almost completely. As some people know, even at the end of everything, there will still always be Doom. Dr. Doom inexplicably survived the wiping out of humanity, and since Doom is constantly trying to find ways to become more and more powerful, he decided to try and obtain the powers of the prehistoric Avengers. When All-Father Thor showed up back on Earth and restored life, Doom came back to conquer, powered by the infinitely powerful Starbrand and a spirit of vengeance. He had the powers of the Iron Fist, and he wielded the Eye of Agamotto and the Cloak of Levitation. Plus, he had been developing his own abilities for a millennia. Returning to Earth and being enraged by what has happened to Latveria, plus wanting to claim the Phoenix Force, Mjolnir, and the Thor Force with these abilities, he fought against All-Father Thor, who was powered up by the Phoenix Force inside of the Earth for 99 years, causing massive earthquakes and eruptions, and unfortunately losing, as all villains must. The number 8 spot, Frank Castle with the power of the Ghost Rider and the Power Cosmic. Coming from the same Thanos comic just a few issues earlier in number 13, this version of Frank Castle comes from the future, and he is quite literally insane. He shows up in the most badass way ever, causing a rain of blood before blasting through Thanos' army of Chitauri with hellfire and riding this insane looking space motorcycle. It's quite beautiful, honestly. He then traps Thanos in a chain made of the bones of Sidorak, and using a fraction of the Time Stone, he takes Thanos all the way to the future to meet that King Thanos that we just talked about. This is Frank Castle, who was hit with debris and died during the final stand against Thanos on Earth in an alternate universe. Once Frank made it to Hell, he made a deal with Mephisto to return to Earth for vengeance on the Mad Titan, but when this new Ghost Rider showed back up on Earth, everything was already lost. He was completely alone, and even Mephisto stopped responding eventually. This drove Frank Castle insane. Galactus eventually did show up, and Frank gave Galactus the Earth in exchange for being his herald and gaining the Power Cosmic as well as the Ghost Rider. These two spent hundreds of years together until the day they finally faced Thanos, who defeated Galactus with one fell head-chopping swoop. Frank then became King Thanos' #1 guy. He was such a great character that he even got his own solo series, which you just need to check out. Number 7, Iron Man and Doctor Strange. So, it turns out that Tony Stark is actually a good fit to become the Sorcerer Supreme, as it has happened not just once, but on 2 separate occasions in Marvel Comics. The first time would be in What If issue number 113 from 1998, where Tony and Stephen Strange meet at a party, and after leaving together, Tony is driving when they get into a car crash that ruins the Doctor's hands. This leads Tony on a journey fueled by guilt to try and repair Strange's hands, leading him to the Ancient One and becoming the master of the mystic arts, but also learning how to infuse his tech and armor with magic to create a much more capable hero that is portrayed to Dormammu by Stephen Strange, who becomes almost like Baron Mordo. Now the second time would be an all-new X-Men Annual number 1 from 2014, which showed us Iron Man from Earth TRN 591, who brought together the Avengers to permanently end the threat of Thanos, which resulted in the alien races of the universe rewarding Earth with technology, making making it a utopia, and Tony would start to lean more into his mystical side, becoming the Sorcerer Supreme and being able to solve conflicts without any kind of real fighting, and living youthfully comfortable at 126 years old, which is insane. And then the thumbnail for this list is also an Iron Sorcerer Supreme, but that is actually Stephen Strange with an Iron Man armor from Savage Avengers number 9 called the Iron Mage, and Savage Avengers Volume 1 is a must-read, so you can check that one out for yourself. I'm moving on. Number 6. Hal Jordan and the Spectre. This point also gets to be a bit of a 2-in-1, but this time we aren't looking at alternate universes. After the incredibly infamous destruction of Hal Jordan's home, Coast City, at the hands of Cyborg, Superman, and Mongol, Hal goes a little bit bonkers with his grief, leading to the Emerald Twilight story. Hal tries to create a hard-light construct of the entirety of Coast City and the people that he knew who perished living in it, using all the charge in his ring that he had to do so. The Guardians of the Universe scolded Hal for irresponsibly using his power for his own personal reasons and demanded he report for discipline. But, the Guardians were the ones who were responsible for Hal not being in Coast City to save it in the first place. So, Hal, all by his lonesome and absolutely insane, tore through 8 of the strongest lanterns, taking their rings. He obliterated Kilowog, snapped the neck of Sinestro, and then he took down all the Guardians, drained the central power battery, and destroyed the Green Lantern Corps, becoming, or being possessed by, Parallax. He became a universal threat, attempting to restart the universe, but was eventually defeated by the heroes and sacrificed himself. But following that, he eventually became the new host for the Spectre, becoming God's vengeance and one of the most powerful entities in DC Comics for a time. Number 5. The Herald of Thunder. In the 2020 volume of Thor, written by Donny Cates, Nick Klein, and Matt Wilson, the god of strength and thunder has finally become the new All-Father of Asgard. Yay! That on its own comes with a whole host of upgrades to his levels of power, but he does lose his arm and his eyes, so potential negatives there. Not too long after his ascension to the throne, Galactus comes in hot to Asgard, but not with the intention of devouring it like you might expect. Instead, the World Devourer is running from the universe-devouring Black Winter. This is the entity that destroyed the previous iteration of the universe and turned Galactus into its herald, so it's kind of a big deal. Galactus is freaked, and he has learned that Thor will be the cause of his own passing, so in order to keep the Allfather close, Thanos turns Thor into the Herald of Thunder, which returns his arm and his eye, grants him with the power cosmic a huge power boost, and gives him one of the most dope looks for Thor I have ever seen. Definitely my favorite. With this power, Thor was able to completely drain Galactus of his power he had gained eating 5 different planets, and drain the power cosmic from the World Devourer. Then he turned Galactus' body into a massive explosion that leveled the Black Winter to nothingness. Number 4. Wally West and the Mobius Chair. Wally West, as I have said a few times, is probably the most powerful person to be the Flash. He has a whole hell of a lot of feats to prove that, but he reached a whole new level when he first sat on the Mobius Chair. This artifact basically makes whoever is sitting in it completely omnipotent, basically meaning they know everything ever. But Wally isn't the first person to sit in the chair. Obviously there is Mobius, who the chair is named after, but during the Darkseid War in the New 52 Justice League, Batman sat in the chair as well, and it was hella cool. But this is more than that. When Wally sits in the chair, it has been imbued with the energy of Dr. Manhattan. After Wally's involvement in the accidental passing of the heroes at Sanctuary, he was recruited to seek redemption. He removed all the invading dark matter from the multiverse, and in an act to save his kids, he sat in the infused Mobius chair. So now, Wally West, possibly the fastest being to ever exist, gained almost limitless knowledge and gained the powers of Dr. Manhattan, who can create life and manipulate molecules. He used the power to help defeat the Batman Who Laughs in the Death Metal event. In at number 3 is King Thor and the Phoenix Force. Yes, we are jumping back to Thor, but this isn't Earth 616 Thor. This Thor comes from the alternate reality of Earth 14412. His past is pretty similar to the 616 version of Thor that we know, even becoming All-Father Thor after the War of the Realms event. But after that event, at some point in time, Thor leaves Asgard and joins Omnipotent City's Interdeity Justice Department, which means he becomes a cosmic god cop. top. That's so cool. Basically, he arrested gods who would go and fight other gods. He would also become a planet at one point, then he had an affair with a frost giant and had a baby half-giant son, who then had 3 daughters, making Thor a grandpappy. He then went back to being Allfather, which is when Loki schemed to cause the complete annihilation of life on Earth, turning Thor into a big old grump. He would eventually help defeat Gore the God Butcher, restore life to Earth, and then all the way at the end of time, he encountered Old Man Logan, who had the Phoenix Force, and in a battle with a ghost-riding, iron-fisted, star-branded Sorcerer Supreme Dr. Doom, Thor gained the Phoenix Force and fought Doom for 99 years before emerging victorious and going into the Forever Sleep. I hope that sounded as absurdly wild as it is, because it's just insane. Number 2, Venom and the King in Black. The King in Black is the cosmic divine ruler of the symbiotes, basically the god of symbiotes. The King in Black is the nexus of the symbiote hive mind. This means that King in Black can telepathically communicate with, dominate, and control all symbiotes in existence. Now previously, and for millions and millions of years, basically forever, the King in Black was an eldritch god of darkness called Null, and he was the one to first create the symbiotes out of the primordial void that existed before the universe was born. Well, he still got his butt kicked by a human. When Null finally attacked Earth, Eddie, Venom, and Eddie's son Dylan were crucial in the fight. The Venom symbiote broke free from Null's control and rebonded to Eddie and a new symbiote Codex, incarnating as a gigantic version of Venom. On top of that, Eddie was resurrected by the god of light, Null's opposite, which transformed him into a cosmically powered version of Venom. Then, Eddie fused Mjolnir and the Silver Surfer's surfboard into a massive, insane battle axe and used it to easily overpower Null and fly him into the core of the sun. He then became the new King in Black. And finally, in at number 1, it's Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman seems to receive some of the most insane power boosts in DC Comics from time to time, or at least in their prime continuity she has been boosted to insane levels 3 separate times. Now for the purposes of time, I'm gonna tell you only about one of them, which marked Wonder Woman. When she was a child, Diana was marked by the goddess Hecate, the goddess of magic and witchcraft. This gave her a fraction of the goddess's powers, which lay dormant until the Witching War arc of Justice League Dark Volume 2, when it was activated by the Upside Down Man. Now with this power, Diana revived everyone who got killed by the arrival and actions of the Upside Down Man, meaning she brought back Constantine, Bobo, and Swamp Thing, who shouldn't be able to be revived, just so that we're on the same level here. Diana could easily rip literal holes in reality, open portals, move entire mountains with a thought, and the whole of reality shook when she took a step. Zatanna said that Wonder Woman's magical power was like anything she had ever seen or felt before. Now eventually this power grew even further, to the point that Diana was able to defeat the Upside Down Man, who is equal and opposite to Hecate in terms of power, and then she set everything back to the way it was supposed to be. And that's all I gotta say about that.
At number 10, we have Green Lantern's Power Ring upgrade that allows the rings to communicate with the other Green Lanterns in the universe. This feature, added by the Guardians of the Universe, is a huge upgrade that gives the ring a major advantage. Although there has always been an emergency beacon offered as part of the ring's powers, this is only meant to be used to relay to other Green Lanterns in times of distress. The homing beacon is a fantastic way to bring all the powers of the Green Lanterns together at any time, giving them that extra support whenever it's needed. Or even aside from combat situations, this is a great power to allow Green Lanterns to communicate with one another about strategy to better prepare themselves in the planning stages. Considering there are plenty of Green Lanterns throughout the universe, it would otherwise be extremely difficult to ensure that everyone is where they need to be at any given moment. Pretty nifty, and an underrated ability if you ask me. At number 9, we have Sam Wilson's Captain America suit. This is a huge upgrade for this suit, giving it vibranium wings, Gatling guns, and a nice little clip for the shield right on his back. While Captain America's suit usually doesn't change very drastically over the years, it's pretty obvious that it's due to the fact that Cap is strong enough that he doesn't need to rely on his suit to help him. He's usually more of a leader, with his most valuable assets being his military strategy and brute strength. But when he hands off the moniker to Falcon, the classic suit and shield get a huge upgrade. And not because Falcon needs the support of his suit, but because why not? I mean, Falcon has to have wings, so already a Captain America suit with wings is enough. But throwing those guns on it really brings the suit to a new level. And he still gets to keep the shield. I think immortal retired Steve Rogers will sleep soundly at night knowing Sam is on the job with this upgraded suit.
Number 8. Mirror Master. Mirror Master is one of the rogues, the Flash's team of villains that he often has to combat against. Like the other members of the rogues on Prime Earth, Mirror Master also ended up getting superpowers. Unsatisfied with just their weapons, feeling that the rogues were too easily defeated again and again, Captain Cold, their leader, devised a plan to give himself and his team members real superpowers by having their DNA blended together with their weapons, thereby making their abilities inherent. For Mirror Master, this ended up backfiring initially with him being trapped within the mirror world. However, eventually his girlfriend and current fiancée in the DC universe, Lisa Snart, sister of Captain Cold and currently a rogue herself known as Golden Glider, who accidentally also ended up getting powers, saved Sam. Once free of the mirror world, Sam made himself a mirror gun to use as a way to go in and out of the mirror world, which his powers now allowed him to control. So basically, at first it was a setback, but later, with the help of a new mirror gun, it became an asset and an upgrade, I'd say. And of course with the help of Lisa, because he wouldn't be free without Lisa's help. Number 7. Spiral. Spiral is just so cool and so scary actually as a villain, and yet we don't talk about her as much as we probably should here. But on this list, she should fit right in, considering that her even being a villain is kind of in part as a result of upgrades that were inflicted upon her. Spiral wasn't always evil. She actually used to be a normal human woman who happened to be a stunt performer. She did not become evil until later on in her history, being set down that path after being attacked by her villainous six-armed future self, actually. She fell in love with Longshot as a result of this attack as well, and decided to return home to the Mojoverse with him, which ended up being, all in all, a pretty bad decision. Longshot actually was quickly defeated upon their return, and Rita, aka Spiral, ended up in the hands of a villain even worse than her future self, the vile Mojo, whom the Mojoverse of course is named after. Mojo kept Rita prisoner for years and eventually had her heavily modified and brainwashed, forcing her to become his loyal ally and lackey, known as Spiral, while giving her 4 more arms. She ended up being driven mad and was taught in the ways of magic spells, which she often casts by dancing. She also was trained in the intricacies of body modification so that she could later modify her own helpless victims, as had been done to her by Mojo. Number 6. Trickster Rex. Trickster is one of the rogues, but we aren't here to talk about a melding of weapons to his own DNA in order to give him powers or anything like that. We are here to talk about the Strength Force. It is like the Speed Force, but a conduit of a different type of energy. Instead of being about speed, I mean it's obviously about strength, so yeah. Although it does focus on similar principles in comparison to the Speed Force when we're talking at least about, I would say, physics. The Strength Force is apparently all about gravity manipulation and the manipulation of force of motion, which can obviously then be used to make you seem and feel and act stronger, if you happen to tap into, of course, the Strength Force. For Trickster, this resulted in increased bone density and muscle mass, making him bigger and stronger than he was previously. A lot bigger, a lot stronger, becoming more monstrous in appearance. After becoming a host for the Strength Force, Trickster referred to himself instead by the name of Trickster Rex. Number 5. Infinity Ultron. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe animated series from Disney Plus titled What If, Infinity Ultron was revealed as being the main boss at the end of that first season, with all the heroes from alternate realities who were previously introduced in previous episodes having to band together to become the Watcher's guardians of the multiverse. In the end, Infinity Ultron is defeated, being forced to erase himself. However, for a while there, he actually threatened the very fabric of reality, thanks to him retrieving and assembling the Infinity Stones. However, I will say, I don't think we have much to fear in the comic book world from a threat like this. I think the Infinity Stones, or as they were previously known, the Infinity Gems, typically actually have a rule in the comics where they can only affect the reality they're from, so traveling through the multiverse with them wouldn't really work in the comics, because then, you know, you'd go to another reality and then they'd just be useless, so yeah. Number 4. Cheetah the God Killer. Remember when Cheetah got her hands on the God Killer blade? I remember. It was a wild time in comics. This all happened as part of the Year of the Villain event. At the end of issue number 75 of Wonder Woman Volume 5, the 2016 volume, Cheetah ends up being led to the God Killer blade by Lex Luthor's drone. He urges her to follow his drone so he might lead her to the blade, but before that refused to tell her anything before they actually came upon it. Pretty trusting, actually, I would say, to just follow that drone blindly. Mainly, I assume this was done not for any actual reason towards Cheetah, but also to make us, eager to turn the page and be like, where's the drone going? After being given the God Killer, Cheetah is ready to once more confront her nemesis, Wonder Woman. But Lex also urges her not only to go after Wonder Woman and kill her, but also all of the Amazons. The God Killer blade that Cheetah receives as a gift from Luthor is specifically tied to her own genetic pattern, thanks to a nanotech modification. For those unfamiliar with this weapon, it is insanely powerful and can basically shapeshift to accommodate whoever uses it and whatever they specifically need it for, and can easily do damage to even the most durable of superpowered beings or the most divine. When damaged, the blade itself is also capable of self-repairing. So this was a pretty crazy upgrade for Cheetah. Number 3. Joker, King of the World. While we already talked about a period where Joker gained reality warping powers on part 1 of this list, this isn't the only time that the Joker has gotten such power. No. In fact, weirdly, this has even happened, I would say, more than twice in comics. It's happened a few times. I wanted to give a shout out and a thank you here to Corey Graves from the comment section on our first part to this video, who actually suggested this specific occurrence of when this happened, during the Batman vs. the Incredible Hulk crossover comic. So thank you for shouting that out. It allowed me to go back and be like, oh yeah, that happened, and it was so cool. Here, Joker gains an upgrade via an alliance when he allies himself with the Shaper of Worlds. The Shaper of Worlds is actually from Marvel Comics and is a being who can create extremely powerful illusions, which in essence are so real that they appear to shape reality. I mean, you could say he just shapes reality, but they are based in illusion, so I just thought I'd give you some info. The Shaper of Worlds can do this on a planetary level, which is pretty wild. Joker teams up with the Shaper in order to help the being cure their madness, and in exchange, the Shaper will basically make the Joker's dreams come true, making him king of the world. Having finally found the mind that the Shaper was looking for, one unique in all the universe with great ambitions and dreams. Apparently everyone else is dreaming way too small. Fortunately, Batman and the Hulk, while initially pitted against one another, by the end of the comic managed to team up and defeat both of these foes. Yay. Well, sort of. I mean, they definitely defeat Joker. The Shaper kinda just is like, I'm blasting off again, bye! Number 2. God Emperor Doom. God Emperor Doom is one of my favorite villain upgrades of all time, because with God Emperor Doom also comes his own battle world and all the alternate characters and stories which reside within it. It's a cool story that took over and affected all of Marvel, a little story known as Secret Wars. How did Dr. Doom become God Emperor Doom? Well, this was a result of the incursions, kind of. While confronting the Beyonders, no one but Doom was really willing to take on their power and save everything. In so doing, he became the new ruler of the multiverse, and in order to save it from all of the incursion collisions that were happening, created his own reality which combined all of the universes together, becoming its ruler and its god. Doom also held this power largely thanks to Owen Reese, aka Molecule Man, who he kept kinda locked away, hidden away, and used the powers of to make himself like a god. So this wasn't Doom's own inherent power, he was kind of borrowing from Molecule Man. However, in the end, Doom would lose this power in a fight between him and Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, who had survived the destruction of the multiverse in a life raft. Owen would appoint Reed worthy to wield his power, and Reed would use this power, along with the help of his family, to restore the multiverse to normal, restoring most things back to how they were previously, and modifying some elements in an attempt to improve them. In fact, he even gives Dr. Doom everything he wanted for a while by making him think the Fantastic Four were gone, and, fixing his face for him so he's no longer scarred, which is actually really sweet. Number 1. Zoom. Well, most people simply know the Speed Force when it comes to origins of powerful forces in the DC universe. It turns out this isn't the only power type that one can get through connecting to forces. There are many different force types in the universe, and the villain Hunter Zolomon, recently known as Zoom, manages to gain access to not just one, but 2 of these additional force types. In fact, actually I think at one point there are 3 additional ones that he's connected to. One of them is the Sage Force, and as it sounds, the Sage Force is like a fount of wisdom, greatly enhancing the intellect of those that it connects to. This gave Solomon super genius level intellect and also granted him psionic psionic powers, including telepathy and telekinesis, which honestly pretty wild, especially because Hunter's already like OP in my mind. Solomon ended up using Barry Allen and Wally West in order to gain access to and connect with the Sage Force, as he discovered there was a force barrier in his way, which basically prevented these other force types from like coming into the world. He tricked the two of them to break this barrier and then was able to gain access himself to multiple forces at once, including the Sage Force. Number 10. Red Goblin. Well, we've recently got a glimpse at a new Red Goblin who also seems to be more heroic in nature, Normie, the grandson of Norman Osborn. There was also a time when the Carnage symbiote was attached to another, much more sinister presence, Norman Osborn himself. Norman Osborn is typically known for his goblin persona, one of, if not the, arch nemesis to Spider-Man, depending on, I guess, your own opinion. I feel like some people might say Doc Ock is, I personally would say Norman is, but you know, to each their own. However, there was a time when Norman was no longer the Goblin, having been forcefully cured against his will. In order to reclaim his Goblin abilities and persona, he teamed up with Carnage, as Carnage could help the serum work on Norman once more. Bonding together, they became Red Goblin, a terrifying enemy who succeeded in killing Flash Thompson, and almost also defeated Spider-Man himself. In fact, they would have defeated him if it weren't for Peter's own wit, as he convinced Norman to ditch the Carnage symbiote or risk having to share his victory over Spider-Man. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love when villains get super powerful upgrades, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Captain Cold. The leader of the rogues in the DC Prime Earth universe, or at least one of the leaders, Leonard Snart became frustrated that his and his team's tech were not enough to defeat the Flash. As a result, he made a plan to use their weapons in order to imbue them all with powers. They did this by infusing their DNA with their own powers, blending their weapons with themselves in order to give themselves powers, although really this was kind of Captain Cold's decision himself. Everybody else didn't really have as much of a say. While this worked out well for Captain Cold, who gained cryokinesis powers, it did not work as well for some of the other members, who did gain powers, but ones that cost them in terms of their individual lives, being less easily controlled and manipulated as Leonard's, at least in some cases. Number 8. Weather Wizard. Weather Wizard is a member of the Rogues, a villain team who mainly go up against the Flash. When Captain Cold was tired of being defeated time and time again by his nemesis, he decided to take matters into his own hands by combining his and his teammates' weapons with their DNA, thereby giving them powers all their own, as opposed to them, needing to rely on tech and equipment. For Weather Wizard, after the incident, he no longer needed his weather wand and instead simply had control over weather just inherently. He typically preferred to utilize these powers through firing down bolts of lightning at his enemies, which honestly, if I had the power over weather, I'd probably also go with lightning because it's pretty OP. Or maybe, I guess, I don't know, rain that you can't escape. I hate that when it's just drizzling and it's like all around you, even if you have an umbrella up. Ugh. Ugh.
Number 7. Loki, Sorcerer Supreme. As we learn in Doctor Strange number 385, every few decades the Vishanti will gather the greatest sorcerers from around the globe and set them against each other in what is basically a tournament to decide on who will become the Sorcerer Supreme of that realm. There have been 2 previous tournaments, both of which saw Stephen Strange as the winner, but the most recent competition saw something different happen. Loki, Laufey's son, seeking to make up for all the bad things he had done in the past, seemed to actually come out on top, becoming the new Sorcerer Supreme, even though he wasn't even a candidate in the first place. The Vishanti decided that they wanted someone who wasn't immortal to take over as Sorcerer Supreme, which is a bit of a weird reason, but hey, I ain't complaining. Stephen, being an extremely sore loser and wanting to stop Loki from finding an extremely powerful spell, recruits the Sentry, steals magic from Yggdrasil, the World Tree, and allowed himself to be possessed by the Void to take his title back. Turns out that the whole tournament was actually an illusion created by Loki, apparently to bring Stephen down so he would in turn become strong enough to handle some big events that were coming their way, aka War of the Realms, Damnation, Infinity Countdown, and Final Host.
Number 6. Tryon Juggernaut. What's more powerful than the Juggernaut on a regular day? How about a version of Juggy who can literally muscle his way into other dimensions? That is what we're talking about when it comes to this version of the Juggernaut, the Tryon Juggernaut. This all went down after Juggernaut not was imbued with cosmic powers via the Trion, an interdimensional entity that first appeared in X-Men issue number 88. This all happened as a result of the fact that Kane Marco basically lost his abilities after being tricked, and so the X-Men ultimately decided to save him, because, you know, they are the X-Men, they are heroes. When his powers were restored, however, it was revealed that the crystal that they had been stored in after being taken from him was apparently not empty, and with it came the power and influence of the diabolical entity known as Trion, who possessed Kane, elevating his powers. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us that you love us by clicking that like button. Click it, do it, click it.
Click it! Number 5. Gold Goblin. One of the most surprising things to happen to a villain is when they become a hero. Usually this happens with the most likable of villains, Magneto, Doctor Doom, Loki, but one villain who I have never found to be particularly nice was the Green Goblin. Now, sure, Norman Osborn is a pretty conflicted guy who suffers from some severe mental health issues, but given the way he has repeatedly attempted to make Peter Parker's life a living hell, and usually with the most extreme methods, I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him, which, with these tiny arms, isn't very far. Well, later last year, Norman had a bit of a change of heart thanks to the villain Sin Eater. All of Norman's sins had been removed, whatever that means, and now Norman is filled with regret. After supplying Peter with a job and a new suit and even a glider of his own, Norman jumps in to help Peter against Ned Leeds and Roderick Kingsley, the Hobgoblins, donning a prototype suit and glider and being dubbed the Gold Goblin by those who witnessed him. It's not that Norman gained a massive power boost, but more of a morality boost and a cool new advanced look which he is currently using to do good after years and years of being the absolute worst.
Number 4. God Killer Grail. In my previous video, part 2 of this series, I talked about someone else wielding the God Killer, but before that villain had it, Grail did. Which really, this upgrade fits extremely well with her and makes her seemingly even more unstoppable, considering that her whole thing is, you know, kind of basically just killing gods. Initially, Grail's ambition was to defeat her father Darkseid. This was the task given to her by her mother, who was an Amazonian assassin who bore Darkseid's child, seeing the child as a means to an end for defeating the dread new god and ruler of Apocalypse. Grail by herself is already a powerhouse, possessing basically magical abilities as well as new god abilities, so when you add in the God Killer, it really just feels like overkill. Over God kill.
Number 3. King Thanos. Thanos in the MCU is fueled by a desire to save the universe. He erases half of the life in the universe to cut down overconsumption of resources. Well, in the comics, that is not the case at all. In the comics, Thanos is a psychopath, an extremely powerful galactic warlord, all in the name of trying to please a girl. Not just any girl, but Death herself, the skeletal cosmic entity that embodies decay and destruction. And he pines after her hard. So much so that in the alternate timeline of TRN 666, his quest to please her led him to the end of life of almost every single living thing in the galaxy, and he became the king of nothing that remained. He had a servant in the form of Frank Castle, who was a spirit of vengeance and possessed the power cosmic. He kept the Incredible Hulk in his dungeon as his attack dog, and he subjected himself to the penance stare every morning as a nice little reminder of how utterly despicable he is. In order to finally achieve his goal of being with Mistress Death, King Thanos realized he himself needed to pass on, and to defeat the one being who had always eluded him, the Fallen One, which is an incredibly amped up Silver Surfer. To help him do both of these tasks, King Thanos used the Time Stone to bring his younger self to the future, but it didn't exactly go as planned.
Number 2. Queen Ivy. While deceptively named after basically a houseplant, Queen Ivy is one of the most powerful versions we've ever seen of this character. This is a version of Ivy that manifested when it was revealed that she had split into 2 separate beings, Ivy and Queen Ivy. Ivy was more fixated on the fact that she was going through, you know, some major identity crises, while Queen Ivy was kind of more interested in living that true villain life. After the two halves joined back together again, we were left with just Poison Ivy once more, back to her somewhat normal self. But this version of Pamela has definitely been changed by the experience of splitting apart and rejoining, as she now has some fungi-related spore powers. These can be used to infect those who stand against her, and have been shown to result in horrifying hallucinogenic experiences that lead to severe deformation, ultimately resulting in an extremely painful looking death. Would not wish it on anyone.
In at number 1 is the God of Apocalypse. Lex Luthor is one of the greatest villains of all time. For a seemingly normal man with a brilliant mind, he consistently brings the most powerful beings around to their knees. But during DC's New 52, he went to a whole different level. During the Darkseid Wars storyline, Darkseid falls at the hands of the Anti-Monitor. When this happens, Lex was trapped on Apocalypse, where he encountered the Forgotten People, a group who held a prophecy that essentially said that the next ruler of Apocalypse would be a human. Now, while they assumed it would be Superman, all Lex Luthor had to do to make it otherwise was tell a little old lie. Lex said that he was the man from their prophecy, which led the Forgotten People to contain the Omega Effect inside the Man of Steel's #1 enemy. While they warned that he would pass away if he was lying, he actually manages to survive the bonding and becomes the new God of Apocalypse, harnessing the power of the Omega Effect. After becoming bored of the planet he just became the ruler of, he used the power to become the new Superman following the original's passing, but then he used it to fight a pre-Flashpoint Superman, as confusing as that sounds. It was also shortly lived, as Darkseid was revived and took back the power, and it was also part of the confusing mess that was the New 52, but for a time, Lex Luthor was essentially the new Darkseid, and incredibly powerful. Coming in at number 10 is Spider-Man with the powers of the Beyonder. For this point, we are talking about regular old Peter Parker from Spider-Man and Secret Wars #4, when he temporarily gains the powers of the Beyonder. Before Dr. Doom was granted the Beyonder's powers in Secret Wars, the Beyonder power actually went to 2 others. Once the power left the Beyonder himself, it actually went straight to Wolverine, who absolutely could not handle the power, so he almost immediately bestowed it onto Spider-Man. With this power, Spider-Man turns Doc Ock into plants, obliterates a big group of villains, easily rips apart Ultron, literally stomps on the Molecule Man, and defeats Galactus with his fists. He brings a city from the 32nd century into the modern day, creating New Parker City. He saves Uncle Ben on like 3 separate occasions, but then we learn that this all happened in like 1/1000th of a second before Dr. Doom took the power back for himself, which was the way it was supposed to be. Number 9, Silver Surfer becoming worthy. If you want to see a whole whack of upgraded characters, then I send you to the Thanos Wins arc from writers Donny Cates and Jeff Shaw from Thanos Volume 2. Thanos goes to the end of the universe where he has become King Thanos, and in issue 16, a vengeful Silver Surfer shows up to take both of these versions of Thanos on after spending millions of years becoming the last being worthy of Thor's hammer, taking on a darker look imbued with black matter, calling himself the Fallen One, and gaining control over the Annihilation Wave. He shows up with the Annihilation Wave, hits both versions of the Mad Titan with massive blows, he one-shots a cosmic-powered Ghost Rider, he reverts the Hulk back into Bruce Banner, but somehow still gets defeated by King Thanos, who wields the Twilight Sword of Surtur, and then King Thanos and regular Thanos proceed to viciously bring the Surfer to his end. Now I'm telling you, this story is absolutely bonkers, and to prove that, we will now talk about...
Number 8, Lady Deathstrike. I mean, if you know the story of Lady Deathstrike, then I'm sure her upgrades won't be super unbelievable, but also if you know the story of Lady Deathstrike, then her villain upgrades may actually still be pretty unbelievable, because I feel like her story itself is unbelievable. Her origin story is just such a sad one that once you know about how she became a villain, you're probably going to be somewhat shocked and also feel for her, despite all the horrible and unforgivable things she has done as a villain. I know I personally have felt for her, and I think her story is super tragic, so let's get into that. Yuriko Oyama is the daughter of Kenji Oyama, a brilliant scientist but cruel father who actually invented the adamantium bonding process and was known as the criminal overlord Lord Darkwind. He created the adamantium bonding process and then it was stolen from him. Despite the fact that Yuriko was frequently mistreated by her father and even given a permanent face scar by him, which he gave to all his children, how nice, as a reflection of his own facial scarring that he suffered as a result of a World War II battle, Yuriko would eventually grow to emulate him anyways. Initially, she despised her father and even ended up killing him while protecting the hero Daredevil, which you'd think means that she would grow up to, you know, become a hero and do some good stuff. However, even once free of her father physically, she could not escape his hold on her mentally. Her lover, one of his assassins, who was blindly devoted to him, ended up taking his own life following Lord Darkwind's death. This caused a shift in Yuriko, who then set out to carry on her father's legacy instead of condemning him, which you'd think she would have, cybernetically enhancing her entire body and continuing to upgrade it more and more as time went on. And that's how she kind of becomes becomes basically a major Wolverine villain because she's all like, that adamantium bonding process, I must get Wolverine and take it back of my father's legacy. Number 7. Heatwave. Heatwave was another of the rogues who was part of the genome experiment to have their DNA combined with that of their weapons. However, Captain Cold's transformation was much less horrifying, I'd say, than Heatwave's. Like Captain Cold, Mick Rory's weapon was also elemental in nature, with his being a heat gun as opposed to a cold gun. His DNA combined with his weapon gave him pyrokinesis abilities, which looked like they were pretty terrifying to him initially, as his whole body ignited in flames. Not gonna lie, I'd also be pretty afraid of that. That doesn't sound like great powers to me. I do not like fire, so I like to be a fair distance away from fire. Safety. Number 6. Absolute Carnage. During the Absolute Carnage event, Carnage received one of the most epic upgrades ever, especially considering at the time, he was pretty dead. Carnage had returned to Earth from space and in essence basically burned up on re-entry. Despite the symbiote's aim to try and keep its host, Cletus Cassidy, safe, the two entities combined as one both perished on their return. However, this wouldn't be the end for them, because they would be resurrected by a cult that worshipped the god of symbiotes, Null, seeking to appease and awaken him. And also because it's Carnage, and Carnage can never stay dead even when you're like, but there's no way he could come back now, right? He still comes back. Carnage would be revived using the Grendel symbiote, making him extremely powerful, especially as he continued along on his mission to devour and collect the codices of all symbiote hosts, located in their spines, whether these hosts were superpowered or not, alive or dead. All in all, it was a very scary time. Number 5. Bizarro. Bizarro is a villain who is known for being insanely powerful, as he's kinda like an evil reflection of Superman, whether that be the version of Bizarro who is like a defective clone or was created to be the opposite of Supes by Lex Luthor, or the version of Bizarro who is in essence an alien from Bizarro World, or Hetrea, where everything is the opposite to our world, to Earth. People speak backwards, bad is considered good, even the formal name of the planet is technically just Earth spelt backwards. Hetrea. Bizarro, however, may be super strong like Superman, that isn't a direct opposite I guess, although his cold vision is, but he does not share Clark's intellect. Usually Bizarro is presented as being very dumb or simple-minded, at least in comparison to Superman, who is in essence an effortless super genius. However, with Bizarro 2, a defective clone of Superman created by Lex Luthor, he was, for a time, given a genius intellect as well. Unfortunately, this didn't last, but still, a super smart Bizarro is a terrifying, or perhaps, depending on the circumstances, more comforting thing to imagine. Number 4. Madeline Pryor, Queen of Goblins and of Limbo? Madeline Pryor is known as the Queen of Goblins, but did you know that she also recently became the Queen of Limbo? It is true. Now initially in the comics, Maddie was introduced to us as a love interest of X-Men member Cyclops, aka Scott Summers, and herself a normal human, so it would seem, without superpowers, who just happened to look like Jean Grey. From there, we learned that her looking identical to Jean was actually no coincidence, as she was in fact her clone, created by Mr. Sinister himself. Learning of this and tapping into her own power as basically a spark of the Phoenix gave her life, learning of this and tapping into her own power as well as experiencing constant mistreatment by her husband and those she believed she could call her friends, the X-Men, caused Maddie to suffer a mental breakdown, which resulted in her becoming evil, reaching out to the demons of Limbo and making a deal with them, and then kind of becoming the Goblin Queen as we know her. This caused the first Inferno event. After being defeated, initially Maddie would continue to pop up every now and then, often returning as a villain. More recently, she was permanently killed but received a new lease on life when she was resurrected on Krakoa. It seems she was ready to turn over a new leaf and forgive those who had mistreated her in the past, moving forward with her life. How healthy. She became the new Queen of Limbo after Magic sought to retire as ruling monarch of the Hellish Dimension, with Magic even going super far to be like, no, I trust Maddie, I think Maddie will be great. However, we later learn in the Dark Web event that Madeline actually wasn't ready to give up her grudges, as she used her newfound power over Limbo to amass a demon army and once more attack New York City. Turns out her pretending to be over everything was a bit of a ruse because she still had some stuff that she needed to resolve. This too, however, would be resolved, but for a time, Maddie was back to being a villain and with a power boost from Limbo. Number 3. Golden Glider. While Lisa Snart's powers may initially not seem like an upgrade, considering, while they did leave her in a coma, they are actually insanely powerful, and once she kinda came to embrace them, made her a fairly even match for the Flash, who is also known for being one of the most powerful heroes around. Definitely one of the most powerful heroes in my book. Like the other rogues, Lisa herself also received actual superpowers during the experiment that was conducted to give the members of the team superpowers. In fact, Lisa wasn't actually one of those who intended to gain powers here, but merely got hers by accident, because the whole experiment went a little wonky, there was an explosion, she got caught in the crossfire of that explosion that granted everyone else superpowers, with her astral form being separated from her body and her physical form being rendered comatose. Eventually she would recover from the explosion, but as Glider in her astral form would go on to recruit her own rogues team, becoming a leader of the team for a while. In her astral form, Lisa is extremely fast, so fast that she can actually appear virtually invisible to most. Not only that, but she can also weaken a speedster's connection to the Speed Force, temporarily disrupting it. See what I mean? Extremely powerful. And Lisa didn't even ask for this upgrade, she didn't even want powers. Number 2. Adamantium infused Bullseye. Maybe one of the most random upgrades to have happened, maybe not, considering at the time kinda almost everyone was like getting adamantium, despite the fact that it's, you know, supposed to be a super rare material in the Marvel universe. But hey, there was a time we were obsessed with adamantium, kinda everyone was getting a little bit, a little piece. Bullseye ended up getting himself some adamantium pieces, some upgrades, which made him an even larger threat to Daredevil in the future. His bones were experimentally infused with the metal substance, or encased, or whatever, making him akin to someone like Wolverine in terms of his durability, and meaning he couldn't just easily be taken out like most human opponents. After all, while Bullseye may be an extremely skilled marksman, possibly the most skilled marksman in the Marvel universe, he was just that, a human with skills. But with the adamantium upgrade, which he received from Lady Deathstrike's father, Lord Darkwind, he was now much more unstoppable and deadly. I will say this, unlike Wolverine, Bullseye does not have a completely coated and infused adamantium skeleton. Only pieces of adamantium coat parts of his skeleton, but this also includes his spine, which is still pretty scarily durable, and I mean your spine is a lot of the things that you need to be durable if you want to do crazy stuff, so he can do some pretty crazy things now. Number 1. Emperor Joker. Emperor Joker has to be one of the most unbelievable villain upgrades we've seen thus far in the comics. Emperor Joker ended up stealing his powers from Mr. Mixius Pitalik, the 5th dimensional imp who is sometimes a mischievous villain to Superman, and at other times kind of like an oddball ally, depending on the story and depending on the writers. Mr. Mixie only planned on giving Joker a small amount of his power, less than 1% I believe of his power. However, the Joker, being the trickster he himself is, managed to trick Mixie into handing over 99.99% of his power instead. Ugh. Using this power, Joker ended up conquering the world easily, becoming Emperor Joker, even going so far as to literally devour China and making Batman his prisoner, who he would constantly torment and kill every single day, resurrecting him the next day to kind of do this all over again. In fact, Batman was left with no memory of this afterwards, having to have his mind wiped of these events, as otherwise he would have been so tormented by this experience that he would have not been able to continue on as a hero because he would have been broken. That's how bad it was for him. Fortunately, in the end, Superman ended up defeating Emperor Joker. Not able to stand against him in terms of power levels, Superman defeated Joker by realizing his weakness, that the Joker really could not go on or continue to exist without Batman, which was why he couldn't bring himself to destroy Batman permanently, and that also meant that he couldn't destroy the universe permanently, so basically that's it. Made him a little unstable, and then they were able to take the power back. Woo!